What's up, guys? Connor and Armin here with PWR Coaching. Today we're going to be taking a look at a hand history that Armin played at, it looks like 5K now on ACR. Looks like four-handed with potentially a recreational player. Pretty interesting hand. 4-bet pot. You want to take us through it?
Yeah, sure. So I open blind on blind. I get 3-bet, and I 4-bet king five because high low king highs are reasonable candidates to 4-bet along with high low ace highs because we could fold out some of the polar range of the big blind. So because they're going to be 3-betting hands like king 8 off, king 6 off, king 5 off, king 7 off, all those offsuit king highs. So a suited, king 5 or king 6. Uh, depending on the rake structure, maybe even like a king 4 could be acceptable. So I 4-bet and get called. Uh, get a pretty bricky flop, an 8-5 3 flush draw. My ace king missed from my range. And imposition's gonna have more pocket pairs, like through like the middling pocket pairs, like nines, tens, like sevens. I'm not really gonna have those as often. I'm not gonna have nines and sevens as often, but I'm gonna have tens plus pretty frequently. So I have the overpair advantage. But I'm gonna have more offsuit air. So I'm gonna have a lot of ace 10 off, ace jack off, king queen off, king jack off, all those offsuit broadways that I'd 4-bet bluff pre-flop to go along with some of these suited hands. So if I'd say, could I bet range here? Maybe. I'd say most of my range bets in theory. So if I'd be range betting here, it'd be a simplification that loses a little bit of EV depending on how imposition's playing. But you know, that's an acceptable betting small is the way I wanted to approach the spot. So I see bet small. Any any thoughts so far?
No, looks
All
good.
good. Good.
Yeah.
And then this is where the hand starts getting interesting. So I see bet, and because a lot of my range missed, imposition is very open to having a raising range because some of their hands are going to need protection, like pocket nines. If they flop an eight, they could use some protection from hands like ace king off, ace queen off, all these hands that I'm value betting. So I get a little bit more than clicked. I get raised by like quarter pot. So the price is really good, so I'm gonna have to continue pretty wide here. So I'm gonna be continuing as wide as like ace queen, just ace queen high without a backdoor flush draw. So depending on my suits, like what I'd expect the raising range to be would be uh, hearts obviously, uh, pocket pairs any protection like nines, so over pairs like pocket nines and tens, and some lower equity hands that are drawing to top pairs that could also fold out some of my offsuit Broadway region that dominate the hand. So that would be like uh, Jack 10 of diamonds in my eyes, 10 9 of diamonds. So hands that still have some backdoor equity that could fold out hands that dominate it. So like if he raises Jack 10 off, Jack 10 the diamonds here, I'm gonna have to fold King Jack off. No suit, like no heart. I'd probably have to fold Ace Jack off, no heart.
Yeah.
So
Pretty interesting what you do with like hands like ace jack off with a heart and king queen off with a heart. Because we can obviously shove those hands. Um, are you always continuing a hand like king queen off with a heart?
yeah, I think so. Now, whether I want to shove it, I don't think I want to shove king high, offsuit king high with a heart, but I think I could definitely shove offsuit ace high because he definitely could raise a hand like ace four of hearts on the flop, and I don't want to raise and get called by that hand because then I'd be drawing rather like pretty dead. Uh, but if I raise, ace jack off or ace queen off with a heart or just ace queen off, then I can still get called by worse draws. So I can get called by if he raises a hand like king 10 of hearts on the flop, I can get called by that and be ahead. Where if he calls by ace four of hearts, he's gonna call that and I'll be ahead or we'll be flipping. So
Yeah,
Uh,
like ace jack off with the jack of hearts, ace queen off with the queen of hearts. These seem like pretty
yeah,
common.
those kind of have the properties to where you have outs, you have six outs versus the overpairs. Uh, but you're also ahead of the some of the draws that imposition might raise. So I kind of want to fall into both categories whenever I want to three bet jam the flop with a hand that isn't valued.
Yeah. And then the calling range is pretty interesting too. It's pretty easy, I think, for as out of position to not want to fold very many hands at all. Like you said, ace queen offsuit with no heart seems like you can't fold that hand.
Yeah, it's really
And you're
borderline.
going to be kind of in a tough spot facing a jam on the turn as well. You're probably going to have to call down a good amount of ace high hands.
Yeah, I think so. So with this hand, I didn't think I wanted to shove because I can get called by draws, but at the same time, if he does raise the flop with a hand like king queen off with a heart, or king jack off with a well, actually king jack off with a heart probably doesn't three bet call a four bet, but king queen off would these positions. So it kind of doesn't make sense to fold out a hand I dominate. At the same time, I don't like my equity when called as much because I only have three overs to pocket tens and nines, and like I'd rather have just two clean top pair outs than my exact hand. And I feel like my exact hand's actually not doing as well versus the flush draws as a hand like ace queen high. So that's what I was thinking. Anyways, I call. And turn is a three of diamonds, and the hand's gonna take a twist here. So because of the range I kind of put him on, so draws some lower equity hands, and then weak overpairs that are looking for protection. Uh, well, what I thought was, all right, a lot of the weak raises on the flop just turned equity, right? And some of the raises on the flop, like hearts, aren't going to be that effective as of a turn jam, at least in theory, because I'm going to be calling single heart hands on the flop, and those are going to be my weakest hands on the turn that are going to pretty much be snap folds. So like if he was holding a hand like king 10 of hearts, it would almost be better to realize equity through checking back. Although I think a lot of people would just just go ahead and shove them after raising the flop because
I
it seems like
I
an easier way to end the hand. What do you think?
I think in practice they end up shoving quite a bit.
Yeah, I think I agree with you about that.
And I
And
think, and I think it's not bad for in position to do that because, like I said, I think out of position
yeah,
may over continue flop, especially if you raise a little bit smaller than he did, and are like out of position is going to have to continue some ace high hands, which feel pretty uncomfortable. And I think depending on the opponent you're up against, you can probably get him to potentially overfold a bit of that ace high region.
yeah, I think my range, I definitely do have to defend just dry ace king or ace queen high sometimes, depending on my suits. If he shoves the turn outright, like with if he's gonna shove the turn with everything, I'm gonna have to call those hands sometimes. And it also depends on what overpairs I trap the flop with, right? So that's something I didn't talk about, but I would call aces every time on the flop. It's an overpair that doesn't need much protection and dominates a lot of the hands that end up bluffing the flop. Kings, queens, jacks with a heart, I'd probably call the flop with because it's more likely to have a low equity hand when I'm holding those hands. And then probably the other hands I'd probably just shove. So that means I'm getting into the turn with all my aces and like half my kings, queens, and jacks. And then obviously all those high cards. So because of the nature of this turn, so imposition's going to turn some equity, and they kind of are very draw heavy in the spot to go along with some uh, made hands that need protection. I thought it made sense to open up a donking range, or so I thought it made sense to donk hands like donk all in with hands that kind of need protection with like jacks, queens, and kind of like my hand because I lose to nines and 8-7 suited, 8-9 suited. But if he shoves the turn, this hand's getting called no matter what, right? So one, because I'm ahead of the draws, I dominate some of the draws, and I lose to the value, and I'm not doing too well versus the value, but the SPR is very low, and I just can't afford to fold much here when it's very reasonable to show up with bluffs. So this hand's not getting folded one way or another on the turn. So I thought, let's shift our focus to the other parts of his range and try to get value from a hand that might check back. Or deny
Well,
equity to a hand that, might have a lot of equity. Like if he just turned the draw with Jack 10 of diamonds, that's a pretty brutal spot, right? And 10 9 of diamonds is a really brutal spot to show up to face a donk jam, right? Because you're kind of
yeah.
at the point where can I even call this hand, right?
Yeah, and those hands are pretty natural, like, or can be pretty natural flop raises because they're completely fine raise folding on the flop.
Yeah, it's not like a ton of equity.
Yeah, so I think it's completely reasonable the way you played it. You do junk jam.
Yeah, I do.
He
And
calls.
he did call, and I didn't get the result that I wanted. He did have 8 9 suited, but I thought this was really interesting. And what else would I donk jam in the spot that would make sense? Like before we hop into the sim. So I did mention like some overpairs. Obviously the value's straightforward to find. But what's like the most efficient way of making a donk jamming range on the turn or structuring a donk jamming range on the turn? So our goal here was to get called by, some diamonds, some hearts, right? So like King 10 of hearts, maybe like King 10 of diamonds even, but Jack 10 of diamonds, 10 9 of diamonds, those hands either denying equity or getting called by them, but Ace 4 hearts can call, King 10 of hearts, if you raise a flop with Jack 10 of hearts, all those hands can call. So we're mainly focused on those hands. We're denying equity to some of the other hands, like Ace Jack off with a heart, for example. So what would make sense to shove that isn't a made hand? So what I'm thinking is, Ace King unblocking diamonds and hearts, Ace Queen unblocking diamonds and hearts. Those hands make sense to me. Other than that, not much. I guess I see bet the flop with, backdoor diamonds of some sort. So the weakest hand I'd say that might show up in my range here is like, man, if I had Queen Jack or King Jack of diamonds, I guess I'd call the flop raise, but I don't think I'd 4-bet them pre-flop, so I don't really turn diamonds here. So it's not like I'm shoving backdoor diamonds. And
Yeah, and if you do, it's ace high diamonds that maybe don't want to
yeah,
be in this
ace four
range.
diamonds exactly to one get called by king high hearts and to fold out like ace jack off with the jack of hearts, for
Sure,
example. Like it'd be
sure.
exactly that. So ace four diamonds exactly, and I would
Okay,
shove ace
we can
four
hop
hearts.
into this then.
Come again?
You would shove ace four hearts on the flop every time, yeah.
Yeah,
It's fine.
I think so. So that's what I think. I guess now we just dive into the sim, right?
Yes.
Now looking at the sim, uh, out of position, c betting 70% of the range, and this is a sim that shoves ace king off half the time pre-flop, so it's not gonna have all the ace kings in the range. So that's something to note. And in positions rating range only 3% with hands that kind of need protection. You're not really seeing aces raise, kings sometimes, but 10 9 of diamonds at a sliver. So we kind of have to look at everything uh, in slivers because it's a really small raising range. I think we actually might get more of a raising range if we throw in
Yeah,
the
I
range.
think like just putting in a range bet for our range is going to be more accurate given the fact that he raised his hand.
Yeah, you might perceive that we're range
At least
betting. So
in positions strategy will probably be more accurate to what was happening in reality.
yeah, so an 8% raising range, that seems much more reasonable. So his raising range is going to be, 8x, pocket nines, 10 9 of diamonds getting in there. Jack 10 of diamonds, not really. Jack 10 of hearts, Queen Jack of hearts, Queen Jack of diamonds, King 9 of spades and clubs. So some very low equity hands that Uh, 1 a7 turns some backward straight draws while folding out some offsuit ace-x. So the properties of a lot of these hands make sense. You kind of fold out hands that you get dominated by while, still having some equity to make the best hand or getting protection from a value hand.
And his hand doesn't raise, but I don't think mistake at all.
Yeah, like if we look at the strategy in EV of 8-7 and 8-9, they're near identical. Like, yeah, his 9 dominates some of my bluffs and has, an out against, let's say I 4-bet a hand like pocket, well, not outs, but it has more equity as a whole because one, it dominates part of my bluffing range, so he can't get outdrawn as easily. Versus it's like a hand like 8-7,
Right.
right? So,
Yep.
the EVs are very, 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 very similar. It makes little to no difference in the grand scheme of things. The raise, and then take a look at my range. So I should be shoving jacks, tens. So ace king a chunk of the time, ace queen with the queen of hearts.
Yep.
Blocks queen high draws and unblocks ace high draws that we dominate. So it's more equity when called by a hand like
Yeah. And
9%.
ace jack, jack of hearts probably a bit as well. Just these
Yeah.
hands always kind of showing up like this.
I think one thing that I'm seeing is not really doing anything, well, not much at all with the queen of diamonds, queen to jack of diamonds, or the 10 of diamonds definitely not doing much because of like that range we kind of saw. That 10-9 of diamonds is raising, queen 9 of diamonds raising, queen jack of diamonds raising. So don't want to block those hands. That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah. You called.
Called, and then we got honestly a very bricky turn that brought draws. So this is like as unique as it gets, right? So yeah, we have a donk jamming range. Only 30% of our range donk jams, but that's encouraging to see considering the result of the hand. My hand jams, so that's nice. But question is, what else jams on top of that? Jack high draws. So if I hypothetically 4-bet 10 jack 10 of diamonds and got a raised on the flop, then I would call the flop. I think I was folding that in game. So if he was finding all those raises on the flop, then I got pretty owned. I'm not gonna lie. If I got owned in that part of my range from what it looks like. And then okay. So donk jamming anything that doesn't have the queen of hearts or the jack of hearts is acceptable, is what it looks like. Well,
Yeah.
I'm actually wrong about the type of overpairs that would shove because I thought it'd be pretty efficient to shove kings and queens and jacks because we need protection. But it kind of looks like, well, honestly, it makes sense. It's more efficient to shove aces without a heart because all the hands that he could call off kind of are king high and queen high draws. So even though we don't really need the protection with with the kings and queens because we're kind of blocking the hands we can get called by that we hypothetically would need protection from. So I guess it's more efficient to shove aces. So that was something I was wrong about. What are you thinking? You think maybe I should have checked my hand or after?
I guess it's somewhat interesting. We can just quickly see how turn looks if we check and face all in.
Yeah.
I guess pertaining to like the toughest continues from our range. Like that's the only thing I think is interesting.
So do you find the raise the flop in position with king nine of spades and shove the turn?
Probably not.
Yeah, I don't think I was finding that one. That's something
No.
that I might find in the future. So if I check and he shoves, what does our range look like?
Yeah, it's like just pretty straightforward until the ace high region, which is where it becomes a little bit difficult to play. And
Yeah,
yeah,
looks like we even have to call some ace queen with the queen of hearts. So that's
yeah.
very
This is why
uncomfortable.
I would expect like any decent regular to just jam a lot of their flush draws on the turn, maybe more than they're supposed to. I think you predicted they're checking back a good amount with hearts, and looks like they are.
Yeah, it seems
I just
inefficient
think
in
it,
theory, but in practice, I feel like these hands do get shoved.
yeah, because it's just a good spot to make out of position have to call a hand like ace queen high. Um, Not the easiest hand to call, just simply. But
Yeah, so we have to call 60% of our range, and they have to shove. They're supposed to shove 77, but if we node lock just a
like
few of these combos
especially at
folding,
like
then
small stakes and mid stakes, I think people aren't going to call hands like ace queen, so it's a really good spot to put pressure on those hands.
yeah, and I agree with you. I think this spot is very easy to overfold for out of position.
Yeah,
And what does he have to call off to our donk jam? Okay, well, if he turns diamonds, he's supposed to call off. So I don't think that's going to happen with 10 high, jack high, personally. So
really tough spot. I
yeah, honestly,
really
if I was in that spot in game, I would fold.
yeah, and it's worth a lot as a call.
Yeah, five chips.
Yeah, a lot.
Just to raise ace queen high, no draw on the flop, and then call off if he unblocks turn diamonds. I actually has to mix even with the queen of diamonds. That's interesting.
Mhm.
So some razor thin overfolds. So I mean, sorry, there's a very narrow overfolding range for here. So honestly, that's not really what I was targeting. It was like, all right, I'm going to target hearts and a few turn diamonds, but that's in the diamonds are in the back of my mind. It was more like get called by hearts, deny a little bit of equity, and then I'm getting stacked versus nines and 8-7 anyways, and it's not like it's unreasonable to make a donk jamming range here because of how my range is constructed, not only because of king five. So uh, would I do it again? Probably because it's cool. Do I think it's gaining a lot of EV? Maybe just a tad bit, but uh, I don't think it's honestly that you know groundbreaking of a play.
No, no, I kind of am indifferent about the play as a whole.
Yeah, I
Don't
mean,
care if you
it
do,
could
don't
go
care if
either
you
way,
don't.
honestly.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's good for now on this end.
Yeah, I mean, I have
Uh,
nothing else to
yeah.
add, honestly.
Yeah. To wrap it up, we obviously run a CFP. If anybody's playing anywhere from as low as maybe 100 NL, but especially if you're playing 200, 500, and 1K NL, and you're looking for sort of a long-term relationship with some like a group of coaches, this up. Our website should be linked below or something like that. But yeah, take care, guys.
Yeah, have a
Later.
good one.